Hello everybody, my name is Muhammad Miza bin Musa and now I want to show you about industry and research collaboration with the subtopic of identifying the best practices. First of all, what is industry and research collaboration? Industry and research collaboration, from my opinion, is the interdependent research relationships between university and companies enable both entities to sustain growth in their areas. While companies rely on university researchers for product innovation, first of all, faculty gain prestige through increased external research funds. Just as industry needs innovative ideas to ensure profits, researchers needs additional research to sustain faculty productivity. For the next one, what is identifying best practices? Identifying best practices is the sharing of practices is often one of the first things to be carried out in the knowledge management initiative. This often begins with common practices such as instruction manuals or how-to guideline. For example, for a newcomer to a job, you can teach them for a first comer. Second of all, a best practice is simply a process or a methodology that represents the most effective way of achieving a specific objective. So another way of defining a best practice is one that has been proven to work well and produce good result and is therefore recommended as a model. So the best way of best practices is sharing best practices is on the job, and so communities and personal contact with others who have used the best practices is the key. Next, what is benefits of best practices? The benefit of best practices, effective sharing best practices can help organizations. First, identify and replace poor practices. Second, raise the performance of poor practice performers closer to that of the best. For example, we change the poor performers to the top tier best performer. The third one, minimize rework caused by use of poor methods. This will, for example, we we work on some project, but we have no knowledge about it, so we end up with using a poor methods. With best practices, we can top notch the methods and produce the best performance. Yeah. For the fourth, save cost through better productivity and efficiency. There's a six type of best performance that I researched it. The first one is identifying user requirement. Identifying user requirement is not uncommon for someone given the task of capturing best practices to start by designing a database. Start by considering where you can really add value. For example, you study for the best practices for the outcome. For example, your job, your income for a job. Yeah. Look at what area of organization need attention because of poor performance or difficult challenge. We can ask ourselves, who can most benefit from better knowledge and understanding of best practices? And how will they access and use them? You can ask yourself how the best practices could involve in your organization or performance. Okay. The second is discover good practices. Discover good practices, one approach is to look at who is producing excellent result and is therefore likely to be using good practices. For example, your friend has a good result on an exam and you want to approach him and example him, you want to follow him and you want to ask how you get a better result. So you ask him and he will teach you and get a good and you have good practices from him. Second, you need to discern which part of their overall approach or method being used are actually good practices. Knowledgeable people in the relevant practices such as subject matters experts, I have explained it. Internal auditors, consultants, and peers. Various knowledge management tools. For example, first of all, communities of practice, after action reviews, knowledge harvesting, and exit interviews. From discover good practices, we can limit ourselves from such the good practices within our organization, but we can alter our research to other field of organization or other organization from other industries. Next. Next is document good practices. From the good from the document good practices, there are several examples. You can include it in your document. First of all, for the title, you should be short descriptive title. This this can be accompanied by a short abstract. The title is an important thing in your document. Next of all is a profile. Your profile should be include several short section outlining processes, function, author, keywords, etc. For the profile, you include this can make it more specific and understandable. For the third one is context. Context, you can include where is this applicable and what problems that it solves. For the resource, what resource and skills are needed to carry out the best practices. So you can, for description, what are the process and steps involved? There plenty of steps. You can include steps from one to somewhere in your description. Improvement measures. So, improvement measures you can include are the performance measures associated with these practices. And then for lesson learned, what proved difficult and what would the originators of the practice do differently if they were to do it again. You can hear the challenge you make the document or etc. Link to resource. Expert contact details, workbooks, video clips, articles, transcript or review meetings. For this, you can include video clips. You can create a short clip and include your clip in your document. This will make it the reader more easy to understand. Article, you can search for article in Google or web browser, any web browser. So you can include an article in your document. Transcript of the review meeting. Transcript of the review meeting. So you have a meeting and you list short important thing and you can include it in your document. The last thing is tools and technique use. Tools and technique use for document good practices. You can from good document good practices can give enough information to allow user of database to decide whether it matches their needs and whether they can find further information. From this, you can organize and classify the information in your database so that user can readily find what they need. For the next one is validate best practices. In most organizations and especially in areas where practices are constantly evolving, rigorous cause and effect analysis is impracticable. Common approach is to have a panel of reviewers comprising internal and external subjects, experts and peers who evaluate a potential best practice against their knowledge of existing practice. It is equally important to ensure that you seek input and feedback from the customer. So this validated practices is important to ensure that these are based on a combination of both on-the-job experience and sound research evidence. Validate best practices is you find a good best practices and you validate it. Is it good or bad? From that, you can ask yourself you want to continue it to use these best practices or not. The next one is disseminate and apply. Most organizations find it essential to complement this with face-to-face knowledge sharing about those best practices. Help the recipient dig beneath the explicit knowledge and gain more in-depth insight, but it can also provide a two-way benefits in the dialogue between the conveyor of best practice knowledge and the recipient can enrich the knowledge of both. From this, from disseminate and apply, there are way of sharing the best practice and knowledge. First, communities of practice. Second, improvement groups or quality circle by discussing ways of improving a process. And the third one is visits to other department organization with good performance. This for visit to other department or organization, you be good performance. You can example their performance and acknowledge it and apply it to your organization and yeah. Okay. For the last one is develop a supporting infrastructure. Infrastructure is often developed as part of wider knowledge management strategy. For the infrastructure, imagine if you had a strong infrastructure, you, you can you can develop a strong development. So if you have a weaker infrastructure, it will provide a weaker development. So for a stronger development, it will be acknowledgement by management. For the cyber general aspect, need attention is the people to facilitate and drive the process through its initial stage until it's become embedded in the organization ways of working. They want the technical infrastructure for document sharing and databases. And the third one, the content management infrastructure to ensure that best practices are documented and classified electronically in a way that makes them easy to find. Alright, that's the end of my explanation for the best practices. Now for my conclusion. The first of all, establishing a program to identify and share best practices is not generally a quick fix solution for organizations that are relatively new to knowledge and management because setting up the required process and infrastructure can be quite a big task unless you already have some aspect of knowledge management infrastructure in place. The second of all, the ease which good practices emerge and are shared depends on the culture of your organization. Okay. If they are not invented here culture, that means there in your area there's not a strong culture, then good practices will slow to emerge and spread as each part of organization will defend its own way of doing things rather than learning from and sharing with others. So that you can develop your best practices if you're in a narrow culture, you have not have a strong culture. All right, that's the conclude of my presentation. Okay, this is the source of reference for the best practices. All right, that's conclude for my presentation. Hopefully you can get enough information from this. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. That's all from me. Thank you.